Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time to go over a recap of this week's games on Sunday. I already touched on the Thursday games in my Saturday special, so you can check that out. I didn't do a whole lot there on them, just kind of one thing on the entire game. The idea here is to stick to a one or a couple quick items from the games and just go over them briefly. So, let's just get to it so we don't waste too much of your time. Just as a reminder, you can subscribe, and every Wednesday there are 4 videos, one rankings video for each position: the wide receiver, running back, tight end, and quarterback. I may move some of those up to Tuesday, potentially. Kind of liked this last week's schedule for some reasons, so we'll see exactly how that works out. This week might be a little bit of an odd schedule again, too. Otherwise, there's not too much else for announcements. There are, of course, the waiver wires as well that come out on Tuesdays that you can you would get notified for, that you can check out. So let's just get moving along here to the first game, which is Carolina versus Denver, and Carolina handled Denver 23-10, and this is going to be a theme today. There are some quarterbacks that came in and may help to pick up some otherwise fantasy dead-ish players and maybe help some teams make a final push to make it into their playoffs. So these quarterback changes that happened this week may have some definite fantasy impacts. Let's start off with Carolina. Sam Darnold played today. Probably gave them their best quarterbacking outside of maybe one game from PJ Walker that they've seen all season, and that definitely helped DJ Moore, who had 4 catches on 6 targets for 103 yards, had a touchdown, and so it was obviously a good game from him. Hopefully some people were able to take advantage of that. And then Deonta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard had a split of that backfield, kind of a 60-40 split in favor of Foreman. And so there's a lot of work in that backfield to be split, so that's helpful. The main thing here is the ceiling on Foreman maybe gets capped a little bit, and Chuba Hubbard maybe is a potential play in a desperate situation, deeper leagues, that type of thing. And also for the receiving game, only 6 targets for DJ Moore. Do you think he was the most targeted receiver? Maybe not on the team. So, you have to get efficient play from a DJ Moore in this offense in order for him to have a week like this, which at least he did have a week like this. It's just, you have to be a little bit apprehensive about the matchup and how the game flow may work out, I guess, for Carolina. Then as far as Denver goes, they still stink. And, Latavius Murray got a fair amount of opportunities as expected. He's about the only one that I would have any level of any trust with in that offense. Now let's move on to Cleveland-Tampa Bay, which went into overtime. One of 4 games that should have gone into overtime. However, 2 of them didn't, thanks to some 2-point attempts in order to avoid going into overtime and win the games, and that worked out for both those teams. One of them's right here, and hopefully I'll remember to point out the second one. In this game, however, it did go into overtime, and it went quite a ways into overtime before Cleveland finally won the game 23-17. As far as Cleveland goes, Cooper Kupp did have 12 targets this game, so don't be too concerned about that final stat line that you see, 7 for 94. Obviously, still a solid day, especially full PPR, but half PPR, non-PPR, you might be a little bit disappointed in that when there's no touchdowns in there, but every opportunity was there. It's fine. Definitely don't be any bit concerned if you were to be. Then as far as Tampa Bay goes, thank Godwin that I put Evans in my scraps pile on my Saturday special show, because Godwin had 12 receptions for 110 yards and 1 touchdown. Evans did not, and I chose Evans for my scrap pile. So if you've seen that show a few times, you've seen Godwin in there probably a few times, and I avoided that this week for a couple of reasons, and it worked out, so woo. Now let's move on to Jacksonville and Baltimore, where, as I said, Jacksonville went for a 2-point attempt in order to win this game instead of going into overtime. So Jacksonville won 28-27, and T-Law, baby! He had a really, really good game, so that was good to see. And then Zay Jones had a really, really big game, and as far as Christian Kirk goes, don't be too concerned. He only had 4 receptions, 46 yards, but T-Law was looking for him. The connection was just there for Zay Jones. However the defense was playing him, maybe it just wasn't helping out for Christian Kirk. He still got 9 targets. A lot of those just didn't quite connect. But I do believe 2 of those targets were also in the end zone, which is a place where Christian Kirk has been able to salvage some of his weeks where he hasn't had a lot of targets or a lot of catches like in this week. Don't be too concerned over Christian Kirk with today's performance. It's just one of those things. He's, even the best of receivers have these kinds of weeks, and he's not quite one of those anyways. Then as far as injuries go, Travis Etienne had a foot injury and did not come back in the game. He did come back to the sideline. Don't know how serious that is or is not. We'll have to find out hopefully by tomorrow. So that way it's info that we can, use for waiver wires. Although I don't know. I guess Jermichael Hasty had a really good game in his Steed, so he would probably be the number one waiver wire option after Travis Etienne. Then as far as Baltimore goes, the main thing here that we can take away going forward as far as Gus Edwards goes is that he dominated the touches from that backfield. So if you're a Gus Bus owner, I think you can have some level of confidence starting to play him next week already. Miami versus Houston went as expected. Miami beat Houston 30-15. As far as Miami goes, they keep on rolling. There's nothing too much to pull out of the performances. However, unfortunately, there was at least one injury. Jeff Wilson had a leg injury. Don't know, once again, really the severity of that. It's hard to tell. They kind of had the game packed away by the time that it looked like he might be coming back into the game. He may be fine, and they may have just kind of sat him. They sat the quarterback, Tua, quite early in the game as well. I don't think that was from injury. I know he did take a big hit a short while before that, but I do believe that he's for sure fine, and Jeff Wilson might be fine. Otherwise, of course, hopefully, Raheem Mostert would be the next guy up. Then Tyreek Hill left the game late due to cramping. He had been cramping earlier in the game. I didn't quite see late to be able to verify this cramping or how bad it might have been, but I wouldn't be too concerned about this by next week. He should be able to get enough water by the time that they're playing next Sunday, I assume. Then as far as Houston goes, Dameon Pierce... Then Nico Collins once again out-targeted Brandon Cooks, so still keeping our eye on that, but once again, Brandon Cooks did end up having the better fantasy day by just a little bit. And Kyle Allen is going to be remaining as the quarterback of the team, and that's probably good overall for that offense. Then as far as the New York Jets and Chicago goes, the New York Jets whooped up on Chicago 31-10 in the battle of the backup quarterbacks, and Mike White is going to be hard to sit down for Zach Wilson after this week's performance. I don't think many people are too surprised that this offense looked a lot better under Mike White, and it did, and they have playoff aspirations here, so I can't imagine that this is going to change, which is really good all in all for that offense, especially Garrett Wilson, and even Elijah Moore had a little bit of life breathed into him today, so that will be nice and helpful. I know my voice just cut out and barely finished that word. Oh well. Then Michael Carter had an ankle injury in this game, did not come back in. Don't know how severe that is or is not, but probably on the more severe side compared to some of the injuries we've seen up to this point. So that would be good. And Zonovan Knight is the main running back that may have some use going forward if Michael Carter's seriously injured. Obviously, they have James Robinson there too, but he was a healthy scratch this week. So wait to see some news on that. But Zonovan White would probably be the best guy going forward from that, if that is something to be concerned of. Then as far as Chicago goes, David Montgomery had 14 carries. Darrington Evans had 9. So unfortunately, David Montgomery didn't really see much of an increase in his workload with Khalil Herbert out. That's my main takeaway there. And then Darnell Mooney had an ankle injury today. I think it was pretty severe, so that won't be helpful. People will be looking for some receivers. Hey, maybe you got one in Elijah Moore. Possible. Probably would be a similar type of receiver as far as how much you could trust him. Now let's move on to Cincinnati versus Tennessee, and pretty much a pretty hard defensive battle. Cincinnati beat Tennessee 22-16. Tyler Boyd only had 4 targets, so if Jamar Chase is still out next week, how do we feel about Tyler Boyd? He's a risky flex kind of guy. There's a lot of upside with him. This Tennessee defense has been a little bit weird because they've been largely not great against the pass, but then they are some weeks, and just in general, they're really, really well coached. So they are they do things well defensively. They play as a unit. And so when they show up, it makes things hard, and things were hard on Cincinnati this week. Just going back to Tyler Boyd, my opinion doesn't change on him, and this really goes back to even the beginning of last year. He's just been really tough to pin in this offense of what weeks he's going to be good, when he's going to be bad. I don't think a whole lot of people have had a whole lot of luck in when they play or don't play Tyler Boyd over the last 2 seasons. If you have to play him throughout the rest of the year, hopefully things work out. He's playable. It's just there's always a risk. Then as far as Tennessee goes, Treylon Burks was in a 3-way tie for being the target leader of the team. That to me was a good sign. I think it was 6 targets or something, not too bad. Especially in this offense, efficiency is usually pretty good for the receivers. Usually some larger plays due to the type of offense that they have, and Derrick Henry keeping defenses honest. Yeah, I'm mildly excited about Burks going forward as I was last week. And he did nothing to make me dislike him this week. Then as far as Henry, he was held in check this week. You know who I'm speaking of. And this is hand in hand with that. As far as the Cincinnati defense holding Henry in check this week, is that Cincinnati defense is tough. I think what they are the most is adaptable, because this goes back to last season too. At times, we thought that they're really strong run defense, and they suck against the pass. But then they'll play a great passing team, and they do awesome against that, and they do bad against the run. So I think they can stop any type of offense if they prepare correctly for that offense. And so we saw that again. So just something to keep in mind, that this Cincinnati defense, they're pretty much good at everything, and they can be bad at things, but especially if you know what the offense that's going up against them is going to be doing, maybe have lower expectations for those players a little bit, because the defense most weeks does pretty darn good. Now on to Washington versus Atlanta, the matchup we were all waiting for all season long, and Washington beat Atlanta 19-13. As far as Washington goes, those Commanders, I don't know who's commanding the backfield. Is it Robinson? Is it Gibson? I don't know. I tried saying, oh my God, Robinson's last week. This is the perfect type of week for him. It's going to be so good, and it wasn't. And so that's why I wasn't too high up on him this week, and had Gibson fairly well ranked, pretty highly ranked. And then things flipped this week, so I don't know what the pattern is. I haven't figured out how to try and say it's this running back or that running back, but it's been a good rushing attack, that's for sure. Then as far as Atlanta goes, also a good rushing team. We saw a cool 50-50 split between Algier and Patterson. They also went up against one of the best rushing defenses in the league, bar none, and they did well on the ground. So nobody can stop this rushing attack, so that's good for those players. Yeah, it's unfortunate there's not somebody getting more rushing plays, and the offense isn't more efficient, so you could get more touchdowns and whatnot from those guys, but they're solid options. Then as far as the Los Angeles Chargers and Arizona goes, here's the second game where the Los Angeles Chargers went for 2 in order to avoid overtime. Very late in the game, gave Arizona 15 seconds on the clock to not win the game. As far as the Chargers go, their offense is, they're kicking now. They're moving. They've got Keenan Allen back. That's good. As far as this game goes, DeAndre Carter had a really, really good game in the passing attack, and I think he brings an element to this offense that they like that Josh Palmer doesn't. So as far as a third wide receiver on that team, I do think it might be DeAndre Carter once Michael Williams comes back. Of course, don't really want to play the third wide receiver on that team. And Gerald Everett with Keenan Allen back is clearly the loser here. As far as Arizona goes, they have 2 of their 3 wide receivers finally back. It's going to be cool once we can see that offense in total, if that ever happens. But regardless of having all their pieces in place that they came into the season with, this offense is turning a corner. They are starting to look like a more cohesive unit. Now, it was helpful today that their running game was clicking. That helps to set everything else, makes life easier for everybody else. But it's also helpful that rushing attack was going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, because they kind of suck against the run. So I'm taking the positive signs from this offense with a grain of salt this week, but you would think as they get all of their pieces together And there was apparently some very productive talks over the last 2 weeks between Kyler Murray and the head coach there. So yeah, it would be good for a lot of fantasy teams if this offense is actually clicking, because they've still been pretty good fantasy-wise while not clicking on all cylinders. Now let's move on to Kansas City versus the Los Angeles Rams. Kansas City won 26-10, and there just weren't a whole lot of great fantasy points producers in this game for Kansas City. They had played a pretty conservative game, knowing that they were going to beat the Los Angeles Rams no matter how poorly they played, as long as they didn't let that defense beat them, basically, is how it goes. So they spread the ball around and took on long drives, and then the defense was able to prevent them from getting touchdowns as they got into the red zone several times, like 4 times. So luckily for Pacheco people, that he got a touchdown and came through in this matchup, and he was probably the big winner on the day, and at least Travis Kelce got a touchdown too. So yeah, points were spread around, and there weren't a heck of a lot of them. So no big fantasy point winners there. Then for the Los Angeles Rams, Bryson Perkins fought, man. If he's their quarterback for the rest of the year, it's at least there's gonna be like a few plays that are gonna be really fun to watch. There's one tonight where he couldn't take the guy down. He fought to convert on a third down while the game was still somewhat within technical reach for them. So, it'd be interested to see if he can develop a little bit more. They can pass a little bit more confidently going forward, but you got to give credit where credit's due, and the kid fought today. Then Allen Robinson, after the game, we found out, is going to be having foot surgery, and he is out for the rest of the season. Then as far as San Francisco versus New Orleans goes, San Francisco shut out New Orleans 13-0 in a not great game. So here's what I thought of that game as far as San Francisco goes. And as far as New Orleans goes, I do have something there. Chris Olave did have 9 targets, although it wasn't a great stat line at the end of the day. It was an acceptable stat line, but he did have 9 targets yet again. So Chris Olave, people don't lose too much faith in him from today. This was not a good day. And Alvin Kamara got injured in the game, and I don't know what the injury was. And that will bring us to our last matchup, Las Vegas versus Seattle, our other overtime game. And one of the two that actually went into overtime. Las Vegas beat Seattle 40-34 in overtime. And that is in part due to my note for Las Vegas. Josh Mother Stinkin' Jacobs had himself a day. So I'm glad I suggested him to someone. Yeah. My projections had him, I think, number 1 this week. I was a little taken back by that. And apparently they knew what the heck they were talking about. So there was a concern with his calf because right towards the end of the fourth quarter, he got like a notification from Fantasy Life. He's out with his calf injury, and then he came back in overtime, and after they didn't use him for a drive, I believe, so came back on the second drive, and in one play, he went 84 yards and won in the game, so... that capped off an already great day. Then as far as Seattle goes, Kenneth Walker was not efficient on the ground. He had like might have been 1.9 or like 1.1 yards on the ground average, but he did get 2 touchdowns. And as far as the running attack goes, it was weird. They didn't really have an emphasis on the rushing attack. They were trying to attack him through the air quite clearly. So although he did have like 15 rushes by the end of the game, there was never a drive where it was like, okay, we're going to pound the ball on him. It felt a lot more sparse, and so I just don't think he's able to get his feet under him at any point and establish the run, essentially. So not too afraid of that, and he got 2 touchdowns, so can't be too upset. Then as far as DK Metcalf goes, he got 15 targets, and they came out of this break. He's really not been super involved all season. He's been fine for fantasy, no huge games, so it seems like they came out with a game plan. Maybe that is something that's going to carry over for the second half of the year. You know, sometimes things will change in an offense after their bye week, and Seattle just had their bye week. It's unless I'm recalling something incorrectly. Look for DK to maybe be just a little bit more involved here going forward, which would be cool. For DK owners, at least. Maybe not for Tyler Lockett owners. So that's it for the recaps. Once again, waiver wire videos come out soon. So depending on like when you see this, it could be out already. And yeah, that's it. So thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you, new subscribers. You're freaking awesome. Same with the old ones. Bye.